Good morning and welcome to our Zoom worship service. My name is Ryan Yuri and I will be today's celebrant while Reverend Elizabeth is on a much-deserved vacation. We begin as we do every week with a territorial acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the land on which our homes and our church were built was not uninhabited when European settlers arrived here with their ideas of conquest and ownership. For those of us who live in Moscow, Pullman, or other nearby communities, we live on the ancestral homelands of the Nimipu, called Nez Perce by French-speaking traders, the Palouse, and the Chichumsh, called the Coeur d'Alene. If you are joining us from another place, I encourage you to discover who inhabited or moved through the place where you now live in the times before colonization and genocide, and where they are now. We pause and remember that we live on ground that is sacred, ground that was stolen, ground that cries out for justice and responsible stewardship. May our remembering help us find the courage to do our part to restore wholeness to the earth and all her peoples. And now, let us join our voices together for our words of welcome, unison chalice lighting, and sung affirmation. Whoever you are, wherever you've come from, whatever your beliefs, whomever you love, and however bumpy your life's journey, know that you are welcome here. Now we hope that everyone here has a chalice or a candle to light and something to light it with. Let us light our chalices together.
Hello, I'm Ginger Yoder and I am going to light our chalice this morning. In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek and seek to share.
From all that dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and love arise. Let beauty, truth, and good be sung in every land by every tongue.
Today's guest speaker is Meyer. Matt is a lifelong Unitarian Universalist with a long background as a musician and worship leader for UU congregations. Matt lives in Boston, but travels as an itinerant worship leader, bringing the good news of Unitarian Universalism to hundreds of congregations all over the country. He serves as the Director of Operations for Sanctuary Boston, a contemporary UU worship community with rockin' music and engaging worship. Matt is also a founding organizer of the UU Song Leaders Convergence, a gathering for all UUs who love community singing to share skills, best practices, and, of course, songs, in order to build a more musical movement together. Matt's children's story, Desmond Gets Free, was recently published by Skinner House Press. To get a copy for a child, teacher, or any justice maker in your life, check out the links that we'll post in the chat. And now, here's Matt.
Thank you. Our opening words come from Psalm 98. Oh, sing a new song to the Eternal. Shout praise, all earth, break into music and song. Praise the Eternal with lyre and song. Let the sea and all within it thunder praise. The world and its inhabitants. Let the rivers clap their hands. Let the mountains sing in chorus. Oh, sing a new song to the Eternal. And our opening hymn this morning is called Blessed Motion, written by Annie Zylstra. It was written when she was inspired by the words of Martin Prechtel, who spoke of what it was like to have survived an earthquake in Guatemala. Prechtel spoke of what it was like to see the ground beneath his feet, that which had always been so permanent and so solid, suddenly rise up in motion. And he said that the myth of believing in solid ground is a myth believed by those that live on the earth rather than as a part of it. For the last year now, I have been constantly searching for a sense of grounding, even as it feels like the ground beneath me is constantly shifting. If that's been true for you as well, I invite you into the spirit of this song, to be in motion with the earth as it continues to change always, and to be in movement together. For all of our music this morning, I invite you to sing along at home even though you're muted. Just because we can't hear each other doesn't mean we can't sing together. It doesn't mean we can't breathe together in rhythm. I believed in solid ground until I saw the earth in motion, in the winds of steady change, and the ever-rolling ocean all moves on in perfect motion. All is change and ever rolling ocean all moves on. Do that little part 2 more times. Perfect motion, all is change and ever rolling ocean all moves on in perfect motion. All is change and ever rolling ocean. I believed in solid ground until I saw the earth in motion, in the winds of steady change, and the ever-rolling ocean. I believe in solid ground until I saw the earth in motion, in the winds of steady change, and the ever-rolling ocean. I believe in solid ground until I saw the earth in motion, in the winds of steady change, and the ever-rolling ocean. I believe in solid ground until I saw the earth in motion, in the winds of steady change, and the ever-rolling ocean. I believed in solid ground until I saw the earth in motion, in the winds of steady change, and the ever-rolling ocean. I believed in solid ground until I saw the earth in motion. Oye, mi gente, traemos la fuerza. La libertad es la única bandera. Oye, mi gente, traemos la fuerza. Listen, my people, we bring the power. La libertad es la única bandera. Liberty is the only flag. Oye, mi gente, traemos la fuerza. La libertad es la única bandera. Listen, my people, my condor, my eagle. No Listen, my people, my condor, my eagle. No human being can ever be illegal. Oye, mi gente, traemos la fuerza, la libertad es la única bandera. Oye, mi gente, traemos la fuerza, la libertad es la única bandera. Listen, my people, my condor, my eagle. No human being can ever be illegal. No human being can ever be illegal. Oye, mi gente, traemos la fuerza, la libertad es la única bandera. Oye, mi gente, traemos la fuerza, la libertad es la única bandera. Listen, my people, my condor, my eagle. No human being can ever be illegal. 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 Our next song is Let the Life I Lead Speak for Me. I originally learned that this was a traditional Irish folk tune, but it seems that it actually came from a 70s R&B group called the Consolers. Either way, I invite you to sing along as you get the hang of it. Let the life I lead speak for me. Let the life I lead speak for me. When I'm lying in my grave and there's nothing more to say, let the life I lead speak for me. Let the friends I have, let the friends I have speak for me. Let the friends I have speak for me. When I'm lying in my grave and there's nothing more to say, let the friends I have speak for me. Let the work I do, let the work I do speak for me. Let the work I do speak for me. When I'm lying in my grave and there's nothing more to say, let the work I do speak for me. Let the love I share, let the love I share speak for me. Let the love I share speak for me. When I'm lying in my grave and there's nothing more to say, let the love I share speak for me. And the songs I sing, let the songs I sing speak for me. Let the songs I sing speak for me. When I'm lying in my grave and there's nothing more to say, let the songs I sing speak for me. Let's do Let the Life I Lead. Let the life I lead speak for me. Let the life I lead speak for me. When I'm lying in my grave and there's nothing more to say, let the life I lead speak for me. Our reading this morning comes from Mickey Scott Bay Jones in her Invitation to Brave Space. Together we will create brave space because there is no such thing as safe space. We exist in the real world. We all carry scars and we have all caused wounds. In this space, we seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We amplify voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. We call each other to more truth and love. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. We will not be perfect. This space will not be perfect. It will not always be what we wish it to be, but it will be our brave space together, and we will work on it side by side. Well, I start just about every morning with a to-do list, usually scribbled on a post-it note in the corner of my desk. And to be honest, it is usually an overly ambitious to-do list. Many things remain unchecked at the end of the day. But one of the things that often goes unchecked in particular is making time for writing. It's not that being a writer isn't important to me. It's so important that every day I put it on the list. And it's so important that every day I collect quotes and prompts and story ideas so that I'll have lots of inspiration when I do write. I'm so dedicated to it that every day I work on other things and I finish other pressing commitments so that eventually I will have lots of time to write. It's so important to me, and I am so dedicated that surely one of these days I will start writing. One of my favorite authors, Anne Lamott, talks about this, about how hard it is to just sit down every day and put your butt in the chair and write. She says, the discouraging voices will hound you. This is all piffle, they will say, and they may be right when they say it. What you are doing may just be practice, but this is how you're going to get better. Some of the best writing advice I ever got, similarly, was from a teacher in a workshop who once told me, take a few moments and, well, don't write, but just write what you would write if you were going to write. I sometimes feel like in all the years since I've gotten that advice, I haven't written anything since, but I have written a lot about what I would write if I did. You might call this the practice of practicing, learning how to practice. The problem is that the finished product we might imagine for ourselves can feel too far from where we're starting. The person we would like ourselves to be can feel so far from the person we see in the mirror each morning. The world as we would like it to be can feel impossibly far from what we read in the headlines each day. The demons of perfectionism stand in the way of writing, just as they stand in the way of creative risk-taking in general. Which is unfortunate because we know that creating a life for yourself that doesn't yet exist requires some creative risk-taking. In uncertain and anxious times like these, just showing up as your best self every day requires setting aside the discouraging voices that hound us. And so often, just imagining a world of true justice and equity and compassion means setting aside those voices that tell you your efforts are just piffle. When the demons of perfectionism show up like this, I try to practice the practicing of showing up for myself and for others. Musicians know something about practicing. One of the requirements for all students at Berklee College of Music, where I attended years ago, is 4 semesters of ear training. Ear training is learning to sight sing the music just by reading the notes on the page, or learning to write down the notes just by listening to a song. Now, when I began school, I knew that there certainly were people who were capable of this kind of magic, but it seemed like some kind of Harry Potter nonsense to me. Like, you may as well ask me to walk in the classroom and transform my desk into a toad using a conductor. I remember the first day of class when there was a sort of nervous silence among most of us students. Silence except for one student who was quite vocal in his nervousness. There was one student who interrupted the teacher in the first few minutes of the very first day to share that he was worried the class would be too advanced for him. He wanted to make it clear that he knew not a single thing about ear training. The teacher kindly paused his introductions, and he explained that we'd all taken entrance exams and he was sure we'd all been placed in the appropriate class. The teacher tried to continue, but was interrupted again. But the man said, "Is this like the very lowest class? Because I need to be in like the very lowest class." Now, at this point, you could tell the teacher was a little embarrassed. He didn't really want to answer that, yes, we were a class of the most basic students in the whole school. He said, well, it is Ear Training 101, so I guess it is the lowest. There is a class for people that have previously failed the 101, but you all are just about the lowest. Now, at this point, some of the other students in the class began to giggle a little bit at this man's anxieties. But I was kind of glad to hear that someone was questioning the class, questioning what felt to me like the absurd notion that sight singing was even something that could be taught. I don't know what happened next for that student, but he never came back to our class. Not because anything we did on that first day was in fact too hard for him, I'm sure of that. But I think he just lacked a belief that improvement was even possible. I kept going though, thinking if generations of students have done this before me, I guess it must be possible somehow, even if I personally can't see the way forward. And I made a commitment to at least practice the material. I've always remembered this other student though, who gave up before he started. It's not just that he didn't try to become a great master at ear training. It's that he didn't even try the practicing of it, which always struck me as the real loss. When the discouraging voices hound me, I sometimes think of him, and I remind myself that maybe for now, the work I'm doing is just practice. But practice is how I'm going to get better. This pandemic arrived over a year ago, and it has been a difficult year to be sure. A time of constant adaptation, a time of the ground shifting beneath us constantly. I imagine that the next year, much like the last one, will be a time of learning and relearning new ways of being together, of organizing our days differently all over again, of organizing our people differently all over again. This is a time of adaptation and change, which means it is also a time of imagining new things, imagining new ways of being, and practicing them into being. This is a time calling on those in power, which in some ways is all of us, to play a different role and to learn some new tunes. And particularly for white folks, this is a time to practice some new skills and learn to play some new roles in our communities. A time for listening in deeper ways we haven't always done so well before, and having some hard conversations we haven't yet practiced enough. Fellow white folks, when you hear people of color making demands in our communities and in our country, now is a time to practice amplifying those voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. This is the way of brave space. If you've inherited wealth that was accumulated in a time of systematic racial segregation, which is true of all wealth in this country, it is time to practice giving it away. If your muscle memory has been to call the police when something goes wrong, now is the time to practice something new. I won't all of a sudden do all of these things. but I will practice the doing of them. Musicians know as well as anyone that muscle memory is very real. We know that consistent practicing changes the very structure of our brains, rewiring our circuitry, forging new connections and new possibilities. No one is born a musician. Musicians are just the ones that learned how to practice. Even songbirds need elder birds to sing to them and teach them their melodies. Practice doesn't make music perfect, but it makes music possible. So let us practice the practicing, showing up for ourselves and others to build a new world of justice and equity and compassion. Practice won't make the world perfect, but it makes a better world possible. Someday, I want to be a true expert at creating brave space, even when there's no such thing as safe space. Someday I want to be a true expert in justice and compassion. I want to be masterful at amplifying the voices that fight to be heard elsewhere, and I want to be skillful at speaking more truth and love. Someday I want to be part of transforming our so-called justice system that has hurt so many so deeply. Someday I want to be part of shifting an education system that fast-tracks some to college and others to prison. Someday I want to be part of transforming an energy sector that is working overtime to overheat our planet. These are daunting tasks, to be sure. On most days, learning to transcribe a symphony by ear seems more manageable than any one of these. But that's okay, because for now I don't have to do all of these things. I just need to practice doing what I would do if I were doing them. So dear ones, don't promise to be your best self today. Just be the person you would be if you were practicing being your best self. Don't try to rebuild a new world in the image of love this week. Just practice doing what you would do if you had committed to such things. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We all have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. And so let us start together, let us grow together, and let us practice together. Our closing song is by Sarah Lynch Thomason, More Waters Rising. This song, like the best music, I think, and perhaps like the best faith communities, calls us not to turn away from the crises of our time, but to face them directly, to name them honestly, and to move forward to address them together. I invite you to sing along as you get a sense of it. There are more waters rising, this I know, this I know. There are more waters rising, this I know. There are more waters rising, they will find their way to me. There are more waters rising, this I know, this I know. There are more waters rising, this I know. Let's try that verse again. There are more waters rising. Here we go. There are more waters rising, this I know, this I know. There are more waters rising, this I know. There are more waters rising, they will find their way to me. There are more waters rising, this I know, this I know. There are more waters rising, this I know. More fires. There are more fires burning, this I know, this I know. There are more fires burning, this I know. There are more fires burning, they will find their way to me. There are more fires burning, this I know, this I know. There are more fires burning, this I know. More mountains falling. There are more mountains falling, this I know, this I know. There are more mountains falling. falling, this I know. There are more mountains falling, they will find their way to me. There are more mountains falling, this I know, this I know. There are more mountains falling, this I know. I will wade through the waters, here we go. I will wade through the waters, this I know, this I know. I will wade through the waters, this I know. I will wade through the waters when they find their way to me. I will wade through the waters, this I know, this I know. I will wade through the waters, this I know. I will walk through the fire. I will walk through the fire, this I know, this I know. I will walk through the fires, this I know. I will walk through the fires when they find their way to me. I will walk through the fires, this I know, this I know. I will walk through the fires, this I know. I will rebuild the mountain. I will rebuild the mountain, this I know, this I know. I will rebuild the mountains, this I know. I will rebuild the mountains when they find their way to me. I will rebuild the mountains, this I know, this I know. I will rebuild the mountains, this I know. There are more waters rising. There are more waters rising, this I know, this I know. There are more waters rising, this I know. There are more waters rising, they will find their way to me. There are more waters rising, this I know, this I know. There are more waters rising, this I know. Dear ones, don't promise to be your best self today. Just be the person you would be if you were practicing being your best self. Don't try to rebuild a new world in the image of love this week. Just practice doing what you would do if you had committed to such beautiful things. You have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow, so let us start together and grow together, and let us practice together. Go in peace, go in love, and go and be blessed as you are a blessing to others.
Now it's time to extinguish our chalices together. We extinguish this chalice that it might glow gently in our hearts. May it light our paths as we leave this place. May it guide our way until we are together again. Thank you again, Matt, so very much for your beautiful music and for your delightful children's story and for your words of wisdom. It has truly been a privilege to have you join our community today, and we're very grateful.